one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Just a couple quick notes. I'd like to acknowledge the first responders working hard during this time at the CWS for keeping us all safe, and also a quick prayer for all the visitors that are traveling near and far from our great city. Amen.
An affidavit of publication is on file for the pre-council and city council meeting, and a current copy of the Open Meeting Act is posted in a white binder on the east wall of legislative chambers.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this meeting of the Omaha City Council. The council thanks you for joining us today. As a courtesy to those in attendance, I would ask you to turn off or mute any of your electronic devices. Madam Clerk.
Item 7, an application to approve a Class C liquor license for Forte Music Hall, LLC, doing business as Forte Omaha, 4727 South 96th Street.
Public hearing on agenda item number 7 is today. Proponents, please.
Mr. President, members of the council, Mike Kelly, 7134 Pacific. We're here for any questions you might have.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, are there any opponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, the public hearing is closed. Is there a motion? Second? I'm sorry. There's Mr. Festerson.
Thanks, Mr. President. I'm supportive of the motion and the second. I just wanted to, since we have two generations of Kellys here in the House, I just wanted to recognize them and as I did this morning with Mike, talk about the nice article about his father and Sean's grandfather in the newspaper on Father's Day. That was quite a story. He seemed like quite a guy and a great life story. So thanks for sharing that with us.
Thank you very much. And this is also the first time I've ever been first at this council, so things are moving on up.
Don't get used to it. No, I'm just kidding.
Don't worry, I won't.
It's been moved and seconded to approve. There no further lights. Roll call.
Pauls.
Yes.
Palermo.
Yes.
Festerson.
Yes.
Harding.
Yes.
Jerem.
Yes.
Melton.
Yes.
Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 7 approved, 7-0. Item 8, an application to approve a Class CK liquor license for LL114 Partners, LLC, doing business as Liquid Lounge, 11341 Davenport Street. A is communications in opposition of the application.
Public hearing on agenda item number 8 is today. Proponents, please.
Jeff Lohmeyer, partner in LL114 at Liquid Lounge.
And you're just going to answer any questions that we may have?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, are there any opponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, public hearing is closed. Mr. Harding.
Yes, thank you. Just wanted to make clarification that the letter of opposition actually stated that they were opposed to a liquor store, and that's not what these guys are doing. So I just want to make sure that was clear and on the record.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you.
Is that a motion?
Oh, and a motion to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve item 8. No further lights. Roll call.
Pauls.
Yes.
Palermo.
Yes.
Festerson.
Yes.
Harding.
Yes.
Jerem.
Yes.
Melton.
Yes.
Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 8 approved, 7-0.
Thank you, council.
Item 9, an application to approve a Class I liquor license for 59182 Inc., doing business as Overflow Lounge, 6016 Maple Street.
Public hearing on agenda item number 9 is today. Proponents, please.
Good afternoon. Sarah Mooney, appearing on behalf of the applicant. I'm an attorney. I'm just here to answer any questions. The manager of the bar is also here. So.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, are there any opponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, public hearing is closed. Mr. Festerson.
Thanks, Mr. President. I just wanted to say hello and welcome to Benson. If you want to give a chance to talk a little bit about what you're doing there in this spot.
Yeah, I will turn it over to the manager.
I see you're wearing your Benson green today, too. That's a good choice.
Thank you. We'll just be opening up a lounge. We will have shuffleboard, jukebox, a couple...
Name and address for the record, please.
Oh, gosh.
Your name and address for the record.
Sorry. Kim Eccleston, 3402 North 82nd Street.
No, his name for the record. No, just go ahead.
So yeah, we'll just offer shuffleboard, jukebox, video games such as like Golden Tee Golf and Bank Shot, and then craft cocktails.
And any renovations to the current building there?
I'm sorry?
Any renovations to the current building?
Yes.
What types of things?
They are The current owners are upgrading the plumbing to fit the codes and whatnot, and then we will put in what we need to run our business out of there.
Mm-hmm. Anything to the facade or to the outdoors too?
I believe he is moving the door on the outdoor facade to make it look to the side instead of in the middle.
Okay.
But that will be about it on that side.
Okay. And you're a tenant, right? You're
Yes.
renting?
Yes.
Okay.
Correct.
I'm sure the owner knows, but I just wanted to make you aware too that that location is part of the Benson Business Improvement District. So they do receive an assessment to take care of that entire area, and just want to make sure you knew that, and we're supportive of that too.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. With that, motion to approve, and I wish you well.
Thank you.
Moved and seconded to approve item 9. There are no further lights. Roll call.
Pauls. Palermo. Festerson.
Yes.
Harding. Jerem.
Yes.
Melton. Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 9 approved, 7-0. Items 10 and 11 are for the same company. Applications to approve Class I liquor license for Kanoa Corporation, doing business as Fernando's Cafe and Cantina for locations at 7555 Pacific Street and 378-384 North 114th Street.
Public hearing on agenda items numbers 10 and 11 are today. Proponents, please.
Mitch Tempest, 1902 Skyhawk Avenue, Papillion, Nebraska, 68133, Fernando's Cafe and
Thank you.
Cantina.
Thank you. Did you wish to say anything as well, or
I'm Carol Tempest. I'm just hanging out with him, if that's okay.
you can hang out with him?
Okay.
Are there any other proponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, are there any opponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, public hearing is closed. Mr. Jerem.
Yes, you've got quite some big shoes you're trying to fill there on this transaction, and I just wanted to see if you're going to continue things the way they are and the recipe for success.
Absolutely. Denny and Bonnie have done a great job there, and we're just happy for the opportunity to be able to take it over and continue on.
I can't tell you how many Friday nights when our kids were little, we were there with the magician or the balloon person. Are you still intending to keep that up too for the little ones?
Joel Cole is still coming in on Wednesday nights right now, and,
Okay.
and we'll continue to.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, I'm supportive of this and wish you well and look forward to seeing you around as my family goes there.
No, thank you very much.
Thank
Chris.
you.
Move to approve.
There's been a motion and a second to approve items 10 and 11. There are no further lights. Roll call.
Pauls. Palermo. Festerson. Harding. Jerem.
Yes.
Melton. Mr. President.
Yes.
Items 10 and 11 approved, 7-0.
Thank you, Council.
Thank you.
Item 12, an application to approve a Class I liquor license for Mariah Bar and Restaurant, Inc., doing business as Mary's Restaurant, 3916 L Street.
Public hearing on agenda item number 12 is today. Proponents, please.
Hi, City Council. This is Jessica Rivera, 4113 X Street, Omaha, Nebraska, 68107. And Maria Rivera, sorry, she just got divorced. 3386 W Street, Omaha, Nebraska, 68107.
Thank you.
I'm translating.
Okay,
Also.
thank you. Are there any other proponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, are there any opponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, public hearing is closed. Who did it? Oh, Mr. Palermo.
Thank you. Since I'm within walking distance, just tell me your hours and tell me a little bit about your restaurant.
Okay, so we sell Mexican and Salvadorian food, and we're trying. We're already open and selling the food. We just need the beer to. We're having Salvadorian beer also, which is from over there. We are open from 9 till 8 or 7. It varies a little. Most of the time we're closed at 8. And then with the liquor license, we're thinking maybe 10. Depends how we go. On Saturdays and Sundays only. And Fridays.
Okay, thank you. With that, move to approve.
Second, no further lights. Roll call.
Pauls. Palermo. Festerson. Harding. Jerem.
Yes.
Melton. Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 12 approved, 7-0.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 13, an application to approve a Class D liquor license for MHX Inc., doing business as Tobacco Outlet, 7649 Cass Street.
Public hearing on agenda item number 13 is today. Proponents, please.
William Anderson, representing for Tobacco Outlet, 7649 Cass Street, 68114.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, are there any opponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, the public hearing is closed.
Motion approved.
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve item 13. No lights. Roll call.
Pauls.
Yes.
Palermo.
Yes.
Festerson.
Yes.
Harding.
Yes.
Jerem.
Yes.
Melton. Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 13 approved, 7-0.
Thank you.
Item 14, an application to approve a Class B liquor license for TAMU LLC, doing business as Everest Gas Mart, 5188 Leavenworth Street. A is communication from the Dundee Memorial Park Association. B is communication in support of the application. C is communication opposing the application. D is stipulations agreed to by the applicant.
Public hearing on agenda item number 14 is today. Proponents, please.
My name is Netra Guru, and this is my first business in a family business. So I'm applying for Class B.
And your address for the record, please.
5188 Leavenworth, Omaha, Nebraska 68106.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, are there any opponents who wish to be heard? Wish to be heard? You want to come down? Is there going to be more than one of you to speak? If you want, you can come down to the front row so we can do this in a timely manner. Whoever wants to go first.
Opponents?
Opponents, whoever wants to go first.
Okay, thank you.
Tell us your
Name and address for the record, please.
Right, my name is Janet West. I live at 5223 Jones Street, and I've lived there since 1970. I raised 5 children in my home in this neighborhood. I have lived on the 5200 block of Jones Street longer than any of my wonderful neighbors. My street is a close family neighborhood. When I moved into my house, there was a gas/garage store at 5188 Leavenworth. I can't remember whether it was my garage. I am sure I purchased gasoline there. In 1975, 7-Eleven took over the property. I may have purchased gas there. My children did buy ices and other treats at the convenience store. I never purchased any groceries, etc., because there was a family-run grocery store on the south side of Leavenworth at 52nd Street. I am not going to review the history of the property since 7-Eleven sold it to Come and Go until the current date, because this is well documented in a letter from the Dundee Memorial Park Association. I will highlight 2 occurrences that occurred during that time period. It was a shock when the convenience store clerk was murdered in 2011. The area around 52nd and Leavenworth includes many stable residential neighborhoods. We know our neighbors, our children play together, we have block parties and holiday parties. The fact that someone was killed so close to where I live was extremely chilling. I have never bought any gas at the convenience store in question. Why should I? I buy most of my gasoline at the baker's store where I purchase my groceries. That gasoline station is more convenient, and I even receive a discount. My neighborhood does not need a convenience store which sells any alcoholic beverages. The businesses in the 52nd and Leavenworth area are all doing well except for the multiple versions of the convenience store.
Thank you. Are there any other opponents who wish to be heard?
I'm Mary Elbert, and my address is 704 South 52nd Street, so I literally live almost across the street from this business. And I'm opposed to it. This kind of business with selling liquor or beer can draw some undesirable individuals from time to time and can lead to armed robberies, as we've seen in the past. So that's my reason.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other opponents who wish to be heard?
I'm Christine Benedicts. I live at 5233 Jones Street, so I'm just right down the alley from the convenience store. There wasn't a lot of notice as far as hearing from the city council about the fact that there was a liquor license applied for. I believe that there would be many more neighborhood people who would who would have loved to come to this meeting and speak in opposition. We don't believe this is a good fit for our neighborhood or that it meets our needs. And I think that we are only representing a very, very small number of people in the neighborhood who are against a liquor license for this location.
Thank you. Any other opponents?
My name is Nick Manhart, and my wife Carolyn and I live at 5226 Jones Street, across the street from Janet and down the street from Christy and Mary. We have 5 children under the age of 14. They're 14, 12, 10, 8, and 2, and we would just like to see, I've lived in the neighborhood for over 40 years, and there's been many iterations, as everyone said, of this business model at that location that have not been successful. I would just like to see a higher use for that property with the expansion of UNMC and the growth of UNO and everything, all the pressures put on by those massive growth, opportunities there. It's really pinching in on the retail opportunities in that area, and there's a large-scale apartment complex going on just east of the former Masonic Manor, the Elmwood Tower. So there's just a lot of growth potential there, and we would like to see some sort of business that would be something we could patronize as a family. Our children, we don't allow them to go to that property because of all the trouble that's been there. They aren't able to walk over there to buy candy or pop or whatever. And so we just like to see a higher use for that property, and maybe even somewhere our children could work when they're teenagers. And so I just wanted to put my name and my wife's name on the record as being in opposition of this particular iteration of a doomed business model.
Thank you. Are there any other opponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, do you wish some rebuttal time? Do you wish to respond to some of what you've heard?
Yeah.
If you would, please. Name and address again for the record.
Okay, my name is Netra Gurung, and the address is 5188 Leavenworth, Omaha, Nebraska, 68106. Actually, I already talked to the member of the community, and they approved me that, Class B license, and they give me that the letter, the terms condition, and I'm gonna follow that. And they said, it's only, single, only beer only, no single can. So I'm gonna follow them, so, and I only apply for the Class B license.
Thank you.
Yes.
Public hearing is closed. Mr. Jerem.
Yes. First, I'd like to thank the applicant for meeting with the representative of the neighborhood board. You seem like you're a nice enough individual, but I'm not quite sure you're aware of the level and depth that the history of this store and the angst that it's created in the neighborhood. But before we get into the greater sentiment in terms of position that I'll take and perhaps as counsel, I wanted to ask you a few follow-up questions. So if you could come up to the microphone again.
Actually,
hold on. I have some questions, and then maybe you can answer them.
Okay.
And so stay close to the mic so we can hear you. Okay. The meeting that you had with the representative of the neighborhood association board, you agreed as a product of that meeting to do 12 conditions that you'd place on the license if the license were approved. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay. Whether this council recommends to the Liquor Commission favorably or unfavorably your license, are you still willing to commit to those conditions?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. The second thing I'd like to ask you is, do you own the property?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Have you closed on the purchase, or is it still under contract?
Yeah, I closed that.
So you are the title record owner?
Yes.
Or your corporation is?
Yes.
The LLC. Are you aware of the history of the past operators of that location in terms of the problems it caused on the neighborhood? And
yes, sir. Yes, that was 2008. And I heard from the other people. And this is gonna be my family business. And everybody will be working. In my family. I'm also aware for that. I want to be safety myself also. So I think this is only beer only is more safer than the single can.
What makes you think as a business model that you can compete with the Quick Trip down the street, the Bakers down the street, and in terms of your business model that your predecessors have not been able to compete with?
You know, I'll be working, you know, and just like, you know, the small business, you know, and my family, you know, so, you know, like, I think it will be good.
Well, the consensus in the past, recent past of the neighborhood has been by the people who live there that it's much of what you heard here today.
Yeah.
The concern, which is reasonable in my opinion because of the past history, is that they'd much rather see a business without a convenience store selling liquor because for whatever reason, when there's liquor sales, there's also holdups, there's armed robberies, there's other issues with people coming around and hanging around and getting up to no good. And that's the kind of thing where you have, and particularly this corner, you've had major reinvestment across the street to the south of Leavenworth. And whether you're aware of it or not, there's additional interest in rehabilitating the Leavenworth corridor to take advantage, as Mr. Manhart suggested, of the explosive expansion and jobs and opportunity from the UNMC campus and the Cancer Center, IXL coming. And so I share his view that the best circumstance for the neighborhood when it comes to this property would be its repurposing or redevelopment, and that if I were to support your application, that it would cause me concern of being incongruent with and not compatible with the sentiment of the people who live and in some cases work so closely by. And I travel that street about every single day, and I wouldn't be able to in good conscience drive by there with a new business if I had supported it and it had devolved like so many of these other stores tend to do over time. Now, I'm not saying that I know that for certain with you. It's just my concern that the risk is too great given what the history has been in that location and what I understand the current market forces to be in your industry in the city, very close by. I just don't think I could reach the level of comfort needed to support you. But I do applaud you for agreeing on the record today to even explain to the Liquor Commission, even if we were to recommend denial, that you would still agree to those circumstances and conditions. Because if for whatever reason the Liquor Commission, which has the ultimate authority to decide whether you get a license and under what conditions, they would at least have you agreeing to that. So that'll be my position here today.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Festerson.
Thanks, Mr. President. Yeah, I share that same dilemma. I mean, my district comes close to this area too. I'm down there almost every day. I'm well aware of the history with the neighborhood and know many of those who are here today in opposition. So I understand and value their opinions on this. And I too share Mr. Manhart's opinion that it sure would be nice to see maybe a greater and higher use of this particular corner now that it has such great potential there with what's been redeveloped just across the street and a very successful restaurant and other things. Not to deny you your right to a business, because you seem, as Mr. Jerem said, like a very well-intentioned business owner as well. But I think given the history here, that's kind of where I fell down on it too. I do commend the neighborhood and you for working on these conditions. I do think they are reasonable and a good attempt to address those concerns. And the dilemma for us is if this doesn't get attached and is not approved by the council, it does go to the Liquor Commission, who could approve it potentially without any conditions. But I guess that's where the voluntary part of this comes in, and should that happen, I would encourage you to follow through on the work you have done with the neighborhood, and I think that would serve you well. But for me, I think the answer today has to be no as well to Liquor Commission in hopes of this corner being something higher and better as we'd all prefer to see.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Ms. Melton.
I kind of wanted to talk a little bit, extend what Councilman Festerson had said, but I have a little bit bigger concern, because you could voluntarily put the stipulations on the record today and said, I voluntarily will do that, but if we deny it, he can change his mind. We're not holding you to that. Once we deny that, you can't say, well, you publicly said something, but we denied him. So there is no guarantee that these stipulations will be part of the liquor license in Lincoln unless we make it part of our approval process today. And so for the neighbors that are objecting, my concern is that if we deny it, he can go to the Liquor Commission, get approved without the stipulations. I want to see those stipulations in place if there's going to be a liquor license on that corner. And I do know that corner very well. I lived at 56th and Leavenworth. And yes, I only let my kids go to Walner's and Gerda's. I made them pass the gas station when they were little and walking down there. Well aware of it. So my concern would be for you, what sounds good, us giving a denial, might not be in your best interest because those stipulations may not be in place in the event the Liquor Commission approves this. And the other thing our city council, what we have to weigh is people will come in front of us and say, well, I want this at this area, or I would like to see a Scooters or a Starbucks or something else put here. But in our country, we have property rights, and individuals who own property get to decide, as long as it fits within the zoning ordinances that we have, what they do with their property. So I can't tell this gentleman, what he should put on his property, nor does the council control that if it's outside of really zoning. So I understand that this might not be the ideal place, but I think we also have to be very cognizant of what we're going to tell individuals that they can do with their property. I would like to see those stipulations in place because, and I don't know if Mr. Acosta-Trejo would be willing to come down and answer a couple questions.
William Acosta-Trejo, Assistant City Attorney.
Thank you. When you've seen some of these before, have there been times when the city has recommended denial, but then the applicant goes and gets approved down in Lincoln in front of the Liquor Commission?
Yes.
And what's the process down at the Liquor Commission? Is it the same kind of process as today where neighbors can go and object, or is it a different process?
Yes, there is there's multiple grounds for hearing at the Liquor Control Commission. One of them is for the local denial, which happens frequently, as well as a citizen's protest. Sometimes those coincide together, and so you have two reasons for the hearing.
Okay. If we were to deny it, then there would be no guarantee that these stipulations would then be a part of the liquor license in the event the Liquor Commission approved. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So in order to ensure that these stipulations are attached to the liquor license, we would want to approve with the stipulations, because then they would be a part of the liquor license. Is that right?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. And I guess that's my biggest concern, is that even if we deny it, we aren't necessarily going to satisfy the opponents, and then they'll end up with a liquor store that doesn't have the stipulations.
That is a possibility.
Okay. Thank you very much. I have no further questions.
Okay. Mr. Harding?
Will, I'm sorry. I had some similar questions, but I just wanted to make sure I was clear and have you clarify. So there still is an ability for public comment when it goes to the State Liquor Commission?
William Acosta-Trejo, Assistant City Attorney. Yes. If there's a local denial, then the case goes to the Nebraska Liquor Control Commission. The commission will then hold a hearing. If the citizen protesters care to be a part of that hearing, there's a form that they fill out on the Nebraska Liquor Control Commission's website, and then they can go and participate in the hearing with really the same ability that I do representing the city's position.
But I'm sorry. So is that only if there's a recommendation of denial?
Yes.
So if there's a recommendation to approve, there's not a public comment period
There
as
is-
part of the application?
There is still an ability for the citizen protesters to file that application
Okay.
for a protest
All right.
to the Liquor Control Commission.
Okay.
But the city obviously wouldn't be involved in that.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure that the neighbors were clear that they may have that opportunity as
Yes.
well. Okay. Thank you. Mr. Fanslow?
Dave Fanslow, City Planning.
I'm going to catch you really off guard, I know, but do you know how is that corner zoned right now?
I don't know, but I would guess it's either community commercial or general commercial.
Okay, and I'm assuming since this hasn't gone through planning board, there's no reason for rezoning to this is a permitted use in this particular zoning jurisdiction.
Correct.
Okay. All right, thanks. I wanted to make sure that was clear too, because on a similar line of what Mrs. Melton was discussing, you know, it's great if we could dictate what people do with their properties, but the property, it goes both ways. You wouldn't want them necessarily telling you to put something on your property that might be contrary to what you want to do. It's a permitted use, and you know, I just don't think it's our position to, you know, necessarily dictate what someone does with their property. They have property rights. It's a permitted use, and they're putting their investment at risk. I agree. I would rather see the stipulations attached to this as it goes forward, rather than denying it, which would give an opportunity for those stipulations not to be put on it. So that's probably the position I'm taking on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Festus.
Thanks, Mr. President. Just one more question, maybe for an opponent. I don't know if you have a spokesperson, if you're all just representing yourselves. I just wanted to ask one of you a question. Mr. Manhart, maybe I'll pick on you if nobody else volunteers here. Just your name and address again for the...
Sure. Nick Manhart, 5226 Jones Street, 68106.
Thank you. So I think council members have done a good job of kind of outlining the dilemma we have here in terms of, do you do nothing or do you attach something and kind of hold your nose as the case may be? So do you understand that distinction? And then the second question will be, do you have a preference? So do you understand if this was to be denied, this could go to the Liquor Commission without any conditions versus it being approved with conditions and the likelihood of that happening?
Yeah. So there's 4 of us here. My mom's here too. She's just here to observe. But so there's 4 of us here in attendance, and I can only speak on behalf of myself and my wife, Carolyn. And I guess I feel like I understand the point you made, Mrs. Melton, Amy, about what could be agreed to here verbally might not be what ultimately is agreed to later. So I guess my personal preference would be for a more, would you say, ironclad, something where we have more of an assurance of an agreement, and if that means you approve it with the stipulations as opposed to denying it with the possibility of changes happening in Lincoln, I guess I would prefer that you approve it, even though I would rather not. But I understand the dilemma and the attachments to that. So I guess my own personal preference would be that you approve it with the stipulations intact, and then we'll just go from there and see what happens. And I don't know if anyone else cares to voice their opinion, but I guess that would be seems like the best way forward.
Okay, thank you for that opinion. Can I just ask for a show of hands, the other opponents that are here? Do you agree with that statement? Okay, thank you. That's helpful to my understanding.
Thanks for offering the opportunity.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mr. Jerem, thank you. I'm sorry, Mr. Festus, are you done? Okay, Mr. Jerem.
Yeah, and I guess in terms of the sentiment of the neighbors who oppose this, I mean, I think that's a wise decision. I don't think it gets me to the point of voting for this, but for those council members whose own conclusion is not to support the license, we did hear from Mr. Acosta Trejo, the assistant city attorney, that if that were our recommendation, the people of Omaha would be represented with his presence to present these conditions. The applicant has said he would continue to agree to those and abide by them, even with our negative recommendation. But we each have to draw our own conclusion. The benefit of approving this with conditions is that you are assured that if the commission approves this, it will be with those very strict conditions. And our ability to enforce those. There's one condition that isn't on here because I sense that since the show of hands, the sentiment of my colleagues might be shifting to approve this conditional. If I could ask you one more condition, name and address.
Netra Guru and 5188 Leavenworth.
Would you agree as condition number 13, and it can either be lucky or unlucky for you, depending on how you look at it, that if you do violate, if this passes and you do violate one of these conditions you agree to, that would be, you would agree, a violation of our city's good neighbor ordinance?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Does that conclude your comments?
You got it?
That concludes your comments. For those of you who are in opposition, today I'm leaning towards, and probably will say by the time of the vote, but I'm leaning towards supporting it, and I'm leaning towards supporting it for the reasons that were given earlier, so that we make sure that there's some ironclad agreement there that you all can hold on to, number one. But number two, we have a couple of neighborhood associations that have weighed in on this as well, and they have both weighed in the affirmative in terms of supporting this individual's liquor license. So to operate as he has agreed to without, is that a no? You maybe? Come on, come on down. Yeah. Okay. Name and address for the record, please.
Dave Schinzel, 319 South 50th Avenue. I'm on the Dundee Memorial Park Board. I just want, it's just a clarification.
Okay.
Our board, as a policy, does not support liquor licenses. We agreed not to oppose.
Okay.
So we're not in support, but we're not.
But you're not opposed.
We're Switzerland on this. That's why we wanted to get these conditions on, and I appreciate condition number 13. We're going to remember that one for the future.
As an admission, at least. I don't know how enforceable it is.
It's at least something on somebody's got something on writing, but we appreciate that. But I just wanted to make that clear that we were not in support.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the clarification. But anyway, that's kind of where I sit right now. When they call my name, I'll decide one way or the other. But I think it would be better for you to have the stipulations in place when you go to the Liquor Control Commission, as opposed to not having them in place. There are no further lights?
Oh, sorry, I was going to say, yeah, with that, I would move to approve with the stipulations attached to our approval.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve item 14 with the stipulations. No further lights. Roll call.
Pauls.
Yes.
Palermo.
Yes.
Festerson.
No.
Harding.
Yes.
Jerem.
No.
Melton. Mr. President.
Yes.
Item approved, 5-2.
Thank you.
Item 15, a request to appoint Stephen M. Vanderveer as manager of Costco Wholesale Corporation, doing business as Costco Wholesale number 1012 for their Class D liquor license location at 12300 West Dodge Road.
Public hearing agenda item number 15 is today. Proponents, please.
Steve Vanderveer, General Manager, Costco Wholesale, 12,300 West Dodge Road, Omaha.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, are there any opponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, public hearing is closed. Moved and seconded to approve item 15. No lights. Roll call.
Pauls. Yes. Palermo. Yes. Festerson.
Yes.
Harding. Jerem.
Yes.
Melton. Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 15 approved, 7-0.
Thank you.
Item 16, a resolution to approve a Big Red Keno satellite agreement for Rain Ultra Lounge located at 8919 North 30th Street.
Public hearing agenda item number 16 is today. Proponents, please.
Yes, Mr. President, members of the council, my name is Katrina Coffey. I'm Vice President of Marketing for Big Red Keno. We're located at 11248 John Galt Boulevard in Omaha. I have with me James Overton, the owner, and we'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, are there any opponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, public hearing is closed. Mr. Festerson.
Thanks, Mr. President. James, if you would. I support the application here, but just thought I'd check in with you and see how things are going since it's been a recent purchase and renovation, right?
Yes, sir. James Overton, 3217 Ohio Street. Everything's been going pretty well. We haven't had any issues. I mean, we're undergoing some renovations, some remodeling now, changing of signage and different things like that. We haven't had any issues there. Like I said, we still have our regulars there. They seem pretty happy with us, and we actually cater to them because, like I said, they keep us in business.
Great.
So
Glad it's going well.
Mm-hmm.
All right, thanks. Motion to approve.
Is there a second? Moved and seconded to approve item 16. No further lights. Roll call.
Pauls. Yes. Palermo. Yes. Festerson.
Yes.
Harding. Yes. Jerem.
Yes.
Melton. Yes. Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 16 approved, 7-0.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Consent agenda. Any member of the City Council may cause any item placed on the consent agenda to be removed. Items removed from the consent agenda shall be taken up by the City Council immediately following the consent agenda in the order in which they were removed unless otherwise provided by the City Council Rules of Order.
The public hearings on agenda items number 17 through 34 are today. If you wish to address the City Council regarding these items, please come to the microphone, indicate the agenda item number you wish to address, identify yourself by your name, your address, who you represent, and if you are a proponent or an opponent. Seeing none, the public hearing is closed. It's been moved and seconded to approve items number 17 through 34. There are no lights. Roll call.
Pauls. Palermo. Festerson.
Yes.
Harding. Jerem.
Yes.
Melton. Mr. President.
Yes.
Items 17 through 34 approved, 7-0. Item 35, an ordinance to designate an enhanced employment area for the Capitol District located at the northwest corner of 10th Street and Capitol Avenue. A is an amendment of the whole.
The second reading in the public hearing was held on June 20th, 2017. Are there any questions or comments from council members? Second, roll call.
Pauls.
Oh, light, I'm sorry. Who's light?
It's not coming
Ms.
on.
Melton, okay.
Sorry. I apologize. I was... No, we had gotten notification that there was going to be an amendment to the ordinance that we had talked about on 35 in regards to the sunset clause and then how the taxes were going to be collected. And I didn't see that. The printout I have is exactly the same. Is that correct, or did somehow I miss the new one?
There is an amendment of the whole.
Okay. And does that have the sunset? Because when the one I pulled up that was attached still wasn't the amendment of the whole.
I'll respond to that. Paul Kratz, City Attorney.
Okay.
The amendment includes several things. One, probably the main thing is that it takes out a piece of property that was in the original amendment. Secondly, it limits it to 20 years. Then also add some language in there that the mayor can sign off on agreements that are developed as a result of this ordinance.
What does that mean?
That, and we do this in a lot of agreements, that the mayor can sign documents that are part of this agreement. Rather than coming back to the council for every single document, the mayor can sign.
Okay. I mean, I'm fine with that. I guess I just didn't know what that. I mean, and I guess part of my problem with this isn't just fundamentally I'm opposed to occupation taxes, but I think I hit that last week. But my problem is we talk about transparency all the time. I mean, you hear about elected officials talking about transparency, and here on the board, we talk about it. And half the time I look at it and I go, well, what is the definition of transparency? Because we just use it so fluidly because it's like a buzzword that sounds good that we all support. This is a case, though, where I feel like it's not very transparent. And I'm not saying that about the developer by any means. This is a tool that was passed that he's choosing to use. But it's the ordinance itself and how it's drafted. So this morning when we asked at pre-council, and I asked last week, how is a bookkeeper for one of these businesses supposed to know exactly how they're supposed to collect the tax? We got a couple different answers, but then we said, well, there's this guidance document that's part of the state statute from the Nebraska Department of Revenue. However, on this document that people get to clarify for them, there's only one occupation tax listed as an example. So we have never seen a case where you're going to have two occupation taxes that have to be assessed to the consumer at the same time. So then the statement we got this morning was, well, those businesses can just call the city and the city will explain it. I mean, to me, fundamentally, if we're passing an ordinance that businesses are going to be required to do, I mean, if the developer chooses to pass it on to the businesses there, and then we say, well, I understand it's about as clear as mud in 3 different documents, but the people can just call the city. To me, that's a problem. I mean, whenever I'm going to go file something in my other job, I'll pull the statute, I'll look at the statute, and I'll follow the rules that are in the statute. Somebody should be able to pull our ordinance, and even the statute and this document, although I really hate that when you start having to reference 3 different documents, and then in those documents you have to reference other laws and ordinances. I'm not sure why we can't just blatantly state for an accountant or a bookkeeper or a business owner exactly how they're supposed to collect this tax. It's called a cumulative tax, and I understand that it's going to be taxed on the subtotal, but then you also have the restaurant tax that's taxed on the subtotal. Having it explained to me, I understand how you're supposed to do it, but I was there this morning, and that doesn't necessarily mean the person that answers the phone in the finance department 9 months from now will actually understand it the way it was explained today. So unless we're going to have our own guidance document that's going to go out to all the owners, then I think, again, this ordinance does not have everything in it that should be in it. And I brought this up last week. It's been an entire week, and even this morning, I don't think it was very clear. And I still go back to the locally owned restaurant that lost $4,000 because their bookkeeper wasn't collecting the tax correctly. And the statute of limitations hit, and we owed them. They overpaid us $4,000, and we could not give it back to them. It was very unfair. It was the Drover for a couple of years ago, Councilman Palermo, and it was really heartbreaking that we had to cost them that money. So now I just feel like I could potentially be setting up other bar owners, and I think asking to have this specifically stated in there is not overly burdensome. So is there any way that we could add that, Mr. Kratz?
Normally, something like this would be set up through the finance department where they create procedures. They did the same thing with the restaurant tax. I think that's what we expected, was that as we get this passed, then the specifics of how it's collected would be set up through the finance department. Certainly, if you wanted to make an amendment to the amendment of the whole, we could add a section stating forth how you want it collected.
Yeah, well, I wasn't able to get a copy of the amendment of the whole.
Yeah.
But
And I apologize, but that was sent down yesterday to the council. So
But I didn't receive it, and the one that was attached to the agenda that's online still didn't have it as of this morning. So anyway, well, those are the problems that I think we have. I guess maybe I can, for this particular ordinance, I would ask Mr. Moylan to maybe do something for the people that are going to be the retailers that need to collect this. Since it's not in the ordinance, perhaps you would be willing to, let those businesses know how to collect, because it certainly there's not much guidance here that the city's giving.
Council member, maybe I can add one more thing to that. You have to remember there's several different ways this tax can be paid. It doesn't necessarily have to be passed on to the consumer. The business itself, and sometimes the business itself, does assume that cost. So if you put it in the ordinance, that's going to indicate or suggest that it has to be passed on to the consumer. That's why with the restaurant tax, we didn't put it in the ordinance. We allowed the finance department to set up a procedure if that particular entity wanted to pass it on to the consumer. In this case, there may be some of those businesses that do not want to do that, and we've seen that in the past. So,
well, and I understand that, so I'm asking for the businesses that are going to pass it on. If this is going to be a part of the tax that you're passing on to the consumer, this is how it is to be collected. I mean, that statement, that term in the ordinance, I just don't think it would have been very burdensome to
Oh, no,
include?
it probably wouldn't be, but again, that's, normally we let the finance department set that up and notify the businesses.
Okay. I mean, I just think what you're doing is you're leaving it up to, you have to make a phone call. I just think it should be in the ordinance. If you're going to have it, this is how it should be collected. We have a guidance document that doesn't contemplate two separate occupation taxes. So I guess, Mr. Curtis,
Steve Curtis, City Finance.
if this passes, would your department be willing to at least do a written kind of guidance document similar to what was attached to the statute for occupation taxes so that the businesses are clear, so they don't have to just rely on whoever happens to answer the phone in the department that day?
Yeah, in this case, there are only a couple of people in the revenue department that work on this anyway, and yeah, we would do that. I think there are only, and maybe Mr. Moylan could at least shake his head if I'm correct, there are only about 20 businesses that are going to be subject to this, something in that neighborhood, other than the apartments, which will be a little bit different. But for those 20 businesses, that won't be terribly burdensome to walk them through how it works.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Pauls.
Mr. Curtis, this morning I found out that in Lincoln, the restaurants do not use this tax, this occupation tax. Is that, am I?
Steve Curtis, City Finance. My understanding, and I think that came from Mr. Kratz, was that there was an area where the restaurants had been exempted from this tax.
Okay.
That's correct. It's my understanding that when Lincoln imposed this type of occupation tax, then they waived the restaurant tax for the restaurants in that particular area.
And that was because the developer chose to do it that way? Is that, was my understanding?
The developer and the city would have had to agree to that.
Okay. Mr. Curtis, now I'm switching to the restaurant tax. Does every restaurant charge the tax, or is it possible for the restaurant owner to pay that tax?
In the case of the restaurant tax, I think you can choose to embed it in your price. You're still responsible to pay the city. I'm not aware of, although I can't say I'm familiar with all couple of thousand restaurants, but I'm not familiar with too many that don't include it on the bill.
Probably you'd feel comfortable saying probably next to none?
I don't know that I've seen one.
Okay, and I understand that. The reason why this is the first time out of the chute with this particular concept, that's one reason why I think the questions that are being asked, we should be asking them, because what we do today or in the near future is going to sit with the rest of the people who come in front of us, because we were told last week that there's another possibility of this coming to us pretty soon. So I think the cleaner we could make this concept, or this ordinance, I should say, the better off we'd be. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hardy.
Thank you. Mr. Kratz, we had some conversations about the use of revenue. Can you kind of go through that? And then I guess as I'm reading the amendment of the whole, I'll just read this part. It says the occupation tax imposed by this ordinance, less any administrative expenses, shall be used to fund any expenditures that are lawfully authorized to be made under the Act and this ordinance in connection with the development, operation, or promotion of a business or redevelopment project located within the enhanced employment area.
Yeah, Paul Kratz, City Attorney. I'll go through a little bit of an explanation. I apologize for the length. There are two areas or approaches of the Enhanced Employment Act. It allows the occupation tax for a community redevelopment area is one way of doing it. The other way, which is an opposite way, is allowing it to be done in a area that is not a community redevelopment area. In this case, we're doing in a community redevelopment area. That attaches to allowable expenses that relate to the TIF eligible expenses that we're used to. The non-community development area has a list of expenses that it can be used for, many of which relate or similar to the TIF eligible expenses, but add a few others such as promotions, marketing, and other activities. In this case, the developer has excessive tax-eligible expenses that could not be recaptured through the property tax increment as a result of the increased valuation. So the legislature, not necessarily for this one, but saw that and recognized that as an issue, so they allowed an occupation tax on top of that in order to help recover some of those costs. As part of this process, we will issue a note, as we do in TIF, to the developer. The developer, that note will reflect the 20-year payout and reflect X number of dollars that correspond with the occupation tax. The developer, in that case, is able to monetize that however he wants. In this case, it's my understanding that the developer self-financed this particular, the excessive TIF-eligible expenses. Now, he could keep that note himself and collect on that. He could take it to a bank and monetize that, or he could take it to another entity and assign it to that entity. Now, the city does not follow that stream or go down that stream. Our only interest is that we know who to send the money to. The initial aspect or the initial analysis is there sufficient eligible expenses to cover the note? Once we determine that, what happens to that note is up to the developer, and how that money's spent is up to the developer at that point.
Okay, thank you. And I know, I think the developer became aware maybe last week or in the last few days of maybe the interpretation that since they are in a CRA, that it would be for, if you will, for that gap in tax increment financing eligible expenses and not for promotion. Is that correct?
That is how the initial analysis is done, is to look at the eligible expenses, and if there are excess eligible expenses, we do a note and we'll apply it and make a note in that amount. And that goes to the developer. What he does with the note itself and what he does with the receipts will be up to him. Usually, if there's a bank note attached to it, that gets paid off from the bank. It's possible he could spend the money on other things, but as long as there are enough eligible expenses, we will take the occupation tax and divert it to the developer or whoever owns the note at that time.
Okay, my mind is that something different than what we talked about a couple hours ago?
I don't believe so, no.
Okay. I thought it was my understanding that you said that that since it's in an existing CRA, that they had to be used for the not for promotional purposes of the venue, but for to make up that gap in tax increment eligible expenses.
I guess what I'm saying is that there are two steps. The first step is what's the excess? And if that excess fits in with those TIF eligible expenses, that's what we look at. Once that money, the occupation tax is given to the developer, he can spend it however he wants. And certainly if he assigns a note to another entity, that money will go to that entity, and that entity can spend the money however it wants.
Okay.
Which could be for promotional or marketing activities or other issues.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to at least publicly state, that I think the developers worked long and hard on this, and I know you're getting to the finish line, so wish you all the success regardless of what happens.
Thank you. Mr. Jerem.
Yes, I get the sense, or I got the sense, that colleagues did not get the amendment of the whole, and there's some uneasiness about that. So, Mr. Jobin, would you come down?
Larry Jobin, 11440 West Center Road, appearing on behalf of the developer.
My question to you is this. If I were to withdraw my motion and the President his second, to lay this over for a couple of weeks to allow the clerk to ensure that each council member has an opportunity to review and digest the amendment of the whole, or insist upon a vote today, having heard some council members express uneasiness about going forward without having seen that, in my sense that there's more that haven't spoken that have the same sense, I'd like to give you the opportunity to be heard.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I think there's a pretty clear understanding between the law department and the developer and the finance department as to how we're going to move this process forward. The problem you have is, of course, there's no council meeting next week, so that puts us on the 11th, and then there's an effective date of 15 days after its passage before it becomes effective. That puts us at the end of July. The hotel is going to open no later than August 1st and potentially could open earlier than that. And you know, this sort of sends a message because, again, this was always contemplated, you know, back when this redevelopment agreement was originally approved on April 22nd, 2014, we contemplated and anticipated specifically in the redevelopment agreement that we were going to be applying for this occupation tax, and it was critically important to the structure.
But in answer to my question
is I'd rather not have it laid over.
Yeah, I know what you'd rather not have, but if you face the prospect of a lack of a majority vote to pass this today, given the discomfort expressed by some, and my sense by others, do you insist upon a vote today or not?
No, I mean, I guess we would accept the layover if we needed to, but again, you know, it just sort of sends a message to the hotel and the other retailers within the Capital District that, you know, this is just another delay, and we kind of wanted to button this up and package it up because we have so many people that are involved in this deal that are relying on, again, this occupation tax being in place, and that's I guess is our, you know, biggest concern. But
yeah, and I mean, I don't know. I mean, I suppose I could do a show of hands, although I wouldn't do that to my colleagues as to who's ready to vote and not. I mean, I'm ready to, but experience tells me that that is fraught with peril.
Yeah.
Mr. Festus. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Pauls.
Thank you, Mr. President. You know, to be honest with you, I was just insulted. And the reason why is, well, the law department understands it, the finance department understands it. Basically, it's implied, well, you guys don't understand it. Well, we happen to be the ones who vote. That's sort of, I think, it was sort of a put down, and I don't appreciate that attitude. We're trying to make this work. Not all of us may agree with what's going on, but we're trying to make a decision based on fact. And as I said earlier, this is something new for the city. We're trying to get it right. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Festus.
Thanks, Mr. President. Yeah, I think it's good that we're asking these questions. This is the first time we're using this ordinance as a city, and there are many other projects that contemplate using this that have already been promised this very mechanism. Crossroads, should it happen, I know a development in my district by Westroads is counting on it. I'm sure there are many more. So it's important that we get this right and that we're answering these questions. And they're practical questions like implementation. So the other thing that really bothers me is that as we're dealing with all these things, there's been an amendment of the whole. And I'm not placing blame on anybody, but I wasn't aware of an amendment of the whole until 5 minutes ago. It's not on the agenda. It was never forwarded to council members. I don't vote on things I haven't read. So I'm not comfortable doing that today, but I would be interested in however long we do lay this over that those questions get answered. And if Ms. Melton has those kind of detailed questions and language questions she was describing being included in a amendment of the whole, I'd be okay with that too if that helps clarify things and makes people's opinions more clear. But as of today, I'm not voting on something I haven't read. So I would substitute motion a layover, and I think we don't meet next week. I don't think we have a full council on July 11th, which I think would be desirable. I think we have a full council on July 18th. I'm not positive about that. I'm kind of looking around to see if anybody's out of town. But I think it'd be important to have everybody. Sorry? So I think my motion would be then to delay until July 18th.
Second.
There's a substitute motion to lay over till July 18th, and it has been seconded. Couple of questions I want to ask before I call for the vote, if you would, please, if my colleagues would indulge me a little bit. Mr. Kratz?
Yes, sir.
Let me ask you this. First of all, we continue to call this an occupation tax. For purposes of the Revenue Department, do they characterize this as a tax?
The occupation tax terminology is in the statute, but the Revenue Department considers this almost like they don't consider it a tax as such. They consider it just an occupation fee, so to speak, being able to do business in a town or in a particular area. So they do not consider it a tax.
And a lot of that has, and in this particular instance, it has to do with the developer not being able to assert as much TIF as he would like to, so he assumed the note. He's assuming the other costs himself. Is that accurate?
That's correct. With TIF, you actually divert real estate taxes to the developer. Here, you're not diverting any established tax. You're simply adding a new tax or fee onto that particular area to help the developer finish his development.
So the developer himself is paying is rather than asking for TIF financing to help with the project, he's assuming the full cost of that, and through this occupation fee, he's recouping some of what he has spent to do this project.
That's correct, and I should emphasize it's a fee that he requested, that the developer requested. It's not something that the council is particularly imposing upon, but it's at the request of the developer.
Okay. Now, let me ask you this: is the rest of the city? Let me back up for a minute. The people that will pay some portion of this fee are those who would live there in the apartments, those who operate a business there, and the hotel. Is that accurate?
That's correct.
Okay. And no one else would have to pay this. Is that accurate?
That's correct. It's just for that particular area.
Okay.
Within the defined boundaries.
Okay. And the way you said it before was that this particular occupation tax would the finance department would work out with the developer how it's to be paid?
I guess more specifically, the finance department will create some guidance and educate the various entities, businesses there, as to how to collect the tax and how the finance department will then collect it from those businesses.
Okay, and now is there any liability whatsoever on the rest of the taxpayers in this city if, for example, the developer who wants to charge this fee didn't collect enough of the resources? That would be on him. That would not be on any. That wouldn't be on anything that the city or the taxpayers would be on the hook for.
That's correct. It's a non-recourse note. If there's a shortfall on the income, it's not made up by the city. It's simply the developer gets less money than he anticipated.
Okay. Mr. Bexon, can I ask you a couple of questions, please?
Keith Baxton, Director, Visit Omaha.
Mr. Bexon, the part of the reason for the establishment of this hotel was so that, in my understanding, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, was so that the Convention and Visitors Bureau and others would have a greater ability to attract more conventions and larger conventions than we would have before, but for the building of this hotel.
That is correct. We look at it as it enhances our convention package and our ability to bring in more and more groups to the city.
And would it be safe to say that the majority of the people, especially those that take up residence in the Marriott Hotel for no matter what the period of time is, they would be the ones that would pay this fee, so to speak? Is that accurate?
I believe so. Most of those would be out-of-town visitors that are here in the city, whether they're attending a meeting, doing business here in the community, or here on vacation.
Thank you. Mike, if you could come up for a second, please. Now, the restaurant would be...
Mike Moylan with
Mike-
Shamrock Development,
Thank you, Mike.
111 North 13th,
Thank
number
you.
101.
Now, for the rest of it, the apartments, that would be a lease agreement that you would have with those who are leasing the apartments. Is that accurate?
Correct.
Okay, and so it would be pretty much spelled out in that, in some sort of document that you would create that they would be responsible for paying this fee.
Correct. Or
And-
the landlord could choose to
Or the landlord could
pay
choose
it themselves as well.
Pay it themselves. That's the same way with the businesses. That would be
It's
in
my
that
understanding, correct, yes. They can choose to whether they're going to pass it on with the bill, or if it's a fixed cost.
But it's up to
event,
them
they
to
could
do.
either-
It's up to them to do it, to decide which way they want it to go.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Moylan. Mr. Kratz, just one more question to you. Again, I just want to stipulate, I just want to make sure I'm clear for the record that if there were no, if the developer did not get the number of folks that he wanted in the apartments, or the number of businesses that were developed, or a number of people in the hotels, the cost that he has incurred would still be on him and would not be on any of the other taxpayers.
That's correct. There would be absolutely no liability to the city.
Okay. One more question, Ms. Pavin.
Cassie Pavin, Mayor's Office.
Just one question to you, Cassie. Is the mayor in favor of this?
Yes, as I stated last week, this is something that the mayor does support.
Okay, thank you. That's the only questions I have. It's been moved and seconded to, there has been a substitute motion to lay over till July 18th. It's been seconded. There are no further lights. Roll call.
Pauls. Palermo.
No.
Festerson.
Yes.
Harding. Jerem.
Yes.
Melton. Mr. President.
No.
Item 35, the motion to lay over to 7/18 is approved 4-3.
Next item.
Item 36, a resolution to approve the Bohemian Cafe Tax Increment Financing Redevelopment Project Plan for a redevelopment site located east and west of South 13th Street and south of William Street.
Public hearing on agenda item number 36 is today. Proponents, please.
Good afternoon, Bridget Hadley, City Planning. The Bohemia TIF redevelopment project that is before you continues revitalization efforts along the 13th Street corridor around 13th and Williams that began last year with the approval of the Little Bohemia TIF redevelopment project. I don't know if you can see it very well, but what I've done is shown in yellow is the Little Bohemia redevelopment TIF project that was approved last year, and it involved the former Bumper Auto project, or excuse me, store, 2 buildings, as well as a former theater. In blue are the projects that are before you today, which represents the Bohemia Cafe redevelopment project. The reason for the name of the Bohemia Cafe is this project that is before you today actually involves the redevelopment of the Bohemia Cafe, which is highlighted in blue here, as well as 4 other projects or parcels, or properties, excuse me. So this aerial shows you a little bit, focuses on the Bohemia Cafe. So again, this is the Bohemia Cafe. This is 13th Street, just for bearings. William Street, this is going north into the downtown area. So Bohemia Cafe, a building to the south, and then there are actually 2 parcels, but 3 properties that are there. So this particular project will involve the total rehabilitation of 5 properties, commercial and residential in total. The idea is to repurpose those properties that are older 1920s version structures that have, to a certain degree, outlived their true usefulness and convert them into some modern structures, modern uses. So here is a site plan that shows you some of the streetscaping that would take place. This is the site plan for the Bohemia Cafe, the building to the south, and then the two parcels next to it, or three parcels across the street, excuse me. So this, maybe I'll keep this close. These three parcels are these three parcels that are on the east side of South 13th Street. And the idea is to convert the residential and the commercial uses into commercial, and then have some, I believe, some residential above this particular commercial property. And then on the north side, these are very conceptual preliminary renderings. So the architect proposed a bakery that is not necessarily what would go there, but this particular parcel represents this property, or this rendering represents that property. And then the Bohemia Cafe itself, which happens to comprise about 2 to 3 buildings, would be converted into possibly 2 restaurants, if not 1, with some residential above, and then commercial use right here to the south. So that would be this rendering that you see there. The idea again is to create, revitalize this particular part of South 13th Street. 13th Street corridor is a main corridor, prominent corridor, as well as a major significant connection from downtown, the old market, going south to the zoo and the I-80 interchange. It is anticipated that there will be about 30 jobs created, about 13 FTEs. The amount of the TIF is $275,000. Estimated total project cost or reinvestment into the area is just almost $2 million, a little over $2 million. TIF eligible expenses or uses are a lot of pre-development costs, land acquisition, site prep, architectural and engineering, but as this involves repurposing existing buildings, there will be rehabilitation costs that are involved. This project has received evaluation from the TIF staff, economic development staff, as well as approval by the TIF committee to meet the community development law to be approved for TIF. The development team is here. If you have any specific questions, I would ask for your approval.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents who wish to be heard?
Good afternoon, Mr. President, members of the council. My name is Sean Kelly, 7134 Pacific Street. Appearing today on behalf of the development team for this project. This is a very exciting time for South 13th Street. The development team believes this redevelopment project will allow for the critical mass to continue mixed-use development along South 13th. With that, we'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, are there any opponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, public hearing is closed. Mr. Hardy.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just wanted to make a couple comments. One, thank you for the investment in the area. 2, I hope the ethnic sandwich shop will still be there. And 3, one of the things I like to do on the planning board was always talk about the percentage of TIF. I think this is about 13 or 14%, if I remember right. 14. Which is, I mean, I know we get a little scrutiny about the way we use TIF sometimes, but I think the city has done a tremendous job of being good stewards of the program. I think we were very effective in using it and good stewards of the law. So the 14% is truly in line, and I, again, applaud the developers for their investment.
Thank you. There are no further lights. Is there a motion? Motion. Moved and seconded to approve item 36. There are no further lights. Roll call.
Pauls.
Yes.
Palermo.
Yes.
Festerson.
Yes.
Harding. Jerem.
Yes.
Melton. Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 36 approved, 7-0. Item 37, a resolution to approve the Hanscom Apartments Tax Increment Financing Redevelopment Project Plan for a redevelopment site located at 1029 Park Avenue and 1040 South 29th Street.
Public hearing on agenda item number 37 is today. Proponents, please.
Good afternoon. Don Seaton, Omaha City Planning. The Hanscom Apartments TIF Tax Increment Financing Redevelopment Project Plan includes the rehabilitation of 2 historic buildings on adjacent sites, one being the Bristol at 1029 South Park Avenue, the other being the Georgia Apartments, built in 1892. Sits along, this is I-480, and it's oriented, let me see, Leavenworth runs east and west, just off the top end of the map here. As I said, this is a historic building rehabilitation project. I think the one that sits up above I-480 you may be familiar with. It's a fairly prominent building you see driving down the freeway pretty readily. The Bristol has 66 units in it. It's a 4-story building. The Georgia has 9 units, and both will be completely rehabilitated. Clarity Development is the developer for the project. They're working on behalf of In Common Properties, LLC, who is the owner of the project. This project makes use of both low-income housing tax credits and historic preservation tax credits. And In Common is very active in the area as well, and has been in that neighborhood. And the developers of this project have reached out and tried to engage the neighborhood in the redevelopment plan as well. Total project costs are $14.4 million. They're requesting about $323,000 in TIF support, and those would go towards public improvements, including sidewalks, curb, gutter, sidewalk, streetscaping, landscaping, some decorative lighting. There's more than $9 million in eligible costs, TIF eligible costs in the project, and I know that Councilman Harding, you were asking about or talking about percentages. Since this involves a rehab of historic buildings, I believe the percentage is around 4%. So it's really pretty low, pretty competitive. It's a good project. It's been before the planning board. Planning staff brings it to you with a recommendation of approval.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents who wish to be heard?
Near Jagarwal with Clarity Development, 3814 Farnham Street. Just here to answer any questions and kind of highlight. This is kind of in line with previous Clarity projects. Here we'll be utilizing a few subsidies, historic tax credits, both federal and state, low-income housing tax credits, and then also partnership with In Common. So personally, I view this as a great project. A lot of affordable projects just focus on housing. This one involves supportive services as well. In Common is luckily just on the same block as these properties, so they're able to provide on-site services at what will be a community room at the Bristol, but also off-site at their office, which is walking distance. So here to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, are there any opponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, public hearing is closed. Mr. Jarrett.
Yes, this is a very important project, not only to this neighborhood, but to the Midtown area as a whole, because it affirms the city's commitment that the administration, the planning director have shared with me, that they share with us, is to provide affordable living options for people who have been caught up in the boom of Midtown redevelopment that before now has been mostly, if not all, market rate driven, where they feel the squeeze of and displacement of residents of lower incomes and lower middle incomes for as a result of those developments. So here you have a LIHTC project that combines these other incentives. The old castle building is what the neighborhood refers to, the property on 29th Street that faces the interstate. In a meaningful way, because we're doing, I think, 75 total units here. So this is a big deal, and I've said it before, And I've talked to the planning director as recently as a few days ago about continuing the city's commitment in Midtown and downtown and along mass transit corridors, and the Bristol is on the Park Avenue mass transit route, and this is within a block of it. It's backdoor neighbor practically, for providing people access to transit that's close by, and working with the developers to achieve this. So hats off to you and In Common Community Development. And if you haven't been there and want to see it, I know I've taken Councilman Festerson there on a tour. It's a neat thing to see in the neighborhood and the resource that they represent. So I'm pleased to support it. Thank you for your investment and help with this particular community development program and this project, and I would move to approve.
It's been moved and seconded to approve item 37. There are no further lights. Roll call.
Pauls. Palermo.
Yes.
Festerson.
Yes.
Harding. Jerem.
Yes.
Melton. Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 37 approved, 7-0. Item 38, a resolution to approve an amendment to the Uptown District Tax Increment Financing Redevelopment Project Plan to acquire additional parcels to construct 18 new row houses.
Public hearing on agenda item number 38 is today. Proponents, please.
Afternoon, Bridget Hadley, City Planning. I realize this project was before you, the replat was before you last week, to talk about the Uptown District, which originally had about 95 row homes proposed to be redeveloped in the Leavenworth Neighborhood Association, or neighborhood. Phase 1, which I have shown here, represented 21 row houses, and that phase is underway right now. I believe there are more than 13 that are under construction, and I was told by Stephen that at least 6 are under contract of those 13. What this amendment does is it adds to this particular phase 1, and it adds 18 units. So what you see here are the 21 units. This is Marcy Street, 31st, 7 units there, 4 units here, 10 units along Mason, between Mason and Marcy. And then the amendment comes in and adds this green space, which is where the 18 units would go. So as a summary, this particular project, originally 95 units, now is 100. The entire Uptown District TIF redevelopment project was 95 units, is now 113 with these additional 18. The original TIF was a little over 4.3 million, is now just over or close to 5.1 million. The estimated total project cost of this entire project was just over 25 million and is now close to 31 million in investment into this particular area. And again, the significance is in the Leavenworth neighborhood area. There have been a lot of rental properties in that particular neighborhood. So what this project has done is to help enhance it and bring for-sale homeownership opportunities into the neighborhood and help to stabilize it. So this continues that particular effort. The amount of the TIF for this particular project is right about $780,000, and this phase 1 grows from 21 units to 39 units. The TIF eligible costs the types of TIF eligible costs remain the same: pre-development costs of A&E, site prep, land acquisition, and some environmental type of costs. Landscaping will happen. Of course, the developer has been working closely with the city staff, Public Works, planning to make sure that the project comes off as proposed, as well as with the streetscaping and so forth. With that, I would ask for your approval.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, are there any opponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, the public hearing is closed. Mr. Harding.
Again, I just wanted to say for the record that I think the TIF amount on this is probably around 15 or 16%.
Of the total project.
Of the total project.
It was 16
Yeah.
originally.
So-
With this, it's probably still close to about 16.
Okay. Thank you.
Moved and seconded to approve item 38. No further lights. Roll call.
Pauls.
Yes.
Palermo.
Yes.
Festerson.
Yes.
Harding.
Yes.
Jerem.
Yes.
Melton.
Yes.
Mr. President.
No. Yes. I'm sorry.
Item 38 approved.
Charged it too
7-0.
much.
Pursuant to City Council Rule 7H, due to no meeting being held July 4th, 2017, the third reading on Agenda Item 39 shall be on July 11th, 2017. Item 39, an ordinance to accept the bid of PGM Service Corporation in the annual amount of $10,723 to provide grounds maintenance services at various police facilities.
Public hearing on Agenda Item 39 is today. Proponents, please. Seeing none, are there any opponents? Seeing none, public hearing is closed. Next item.
Item 40, a request from Engineering and Construction Innovations, Inc. to appeal the rejection of their bid of May 24th, 2017 for the OPW 52988 CSO Monroe Outfall Sewer Separation Project.
Public hearing on Agenda Item number 40 is today. Proponents, please. Seeing none, are there any opponents?
Good afternoon, Heather Tippy, Paris Public Works. The Public Works Department has reviewed the appeal of this. We believe that the premise of the appeal is based on a misinterpretation of our ordinance. The bid review process revealed that ECI did not complete their SEB reserve requirements and did not indicate any reserve participation as a part of their bid. In further analysis of their bid, they indicated that that was something that they hoped to do after award, which, as we have been through many times before, is not an acceptable response in line with our ordinance, and therefore we recommend that their appeal be denied.
Thank you. Are there any other opponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, the public hearing is closed.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to deny the appeal. There are no further lights. Roll call.
Pauls. Palermo. Festerson. Harding. Jerem. Melton. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0. Pursuant to City Council Rule 7H, due to no meeting being held July 4th, 2017, the third reading and public hearings on agenda items 41 and 42 shall be held on July 18th, 2017. Pursuant to City Council Rule 7H, due to no meeting being held July 4th, 2017, the second reading and public hearings on agenda items 43 through 45 shall be held on July 11th, 2017. Item 46 will not be introduced. Items 47 through 49 are for reconsideration. Item 47, a motion by Councilmember Melton to reconsider resolution number 717, adopted June 20th, 2017, the revised preliminary plat for Anchor Point. Item 48, a motion by Councilmember Melton to reconsider resolution number 718, adopted June 20th, 2017, the final plat for Anchor Point. Item 49, a motion by Councilmember Melton to reconsider resolution number 711, adopted June 20th, 2017, the subdivision agreement for Anchor Point.
Just requires a second.
A motion and a second. Motion, yep.
Is there a second?
Second.
The roll call vote will take place at the July 11th, 2017 City Council meeting.
Motion adjourned? Someone? Not yet.
Who we got it? Pauls. Palermo. Festerson. Harding. Jerem. Melton. Mr. President.
Yes.
Item passed 7-0. Meeting adjourned at 3:33 p.m.